The morning started like any other. John Carter stepped onto his balcony, sipping his coffee as he watched the city below. The usual hum of traffic, the distant honking of horns, and the occasional siren painted the familiar picture of urban life. Nothing seemed out of place until he noticed the first oddity. Across the street, a man in a hospital gown stumbled forward, his arms twitching unnaturally. A woman approached to help him, only to recoil in horror as the man lunged at her, sinking his teeth into her shoulder. She let out a blood-curdling scream. John frowned. Was this some kind of drug-induced attack? He reached for his phone, but before he could dial, more screams rang out from below. His heart pounded as he looked down at the street. Chaos unfolded before his eyes, people running, some covered in blood, others being chased by figures with lifeless eyes and gaping, rotting mouths. A loud crash jolted him. He turned sharply toward his apartment door just as his neighbor, Mark, burst in. Blood stained his shirt, and his eyes were wild with fear. "They're everywhere, John." Mark gasped. He staggered, gripping the wall for support. Hey, sit down. You're hurt." John rushed forward, but the second he touched Mark's arm, the man convulsed and collapsed. John knelt beside him, but his medical instincts screamed that something was horribly wrong. The wound on Mark's neck oozed blackened blood, veins darkening beneath his skin. His breathing became shallow before stopping completely. John's breath hitched. No, don't die on me." Then, with a sudden jerk, Mark's body twitched. His eyes snapped open, glassy, vacant, inhuman. A guttural growl rumbled from his throat as his body lurched forward. John barely dodged as Mark's teeth snapped inches from his face. What the hell? Scrambling backward, John grabbed the closest object, his coffee mug, and smashed it against Mark's head. It did nothing. The thing, kept coming. Panicked, John ran into his kitchen, yanking a knife from the block. Mark lunged again, and John had no choice. He drove the knife into his neighbor's chest, but Mark didn't stop. John's mind raced. The head, aim for the head. With a desperate yell, he swung again, this time burying the knife deep into Mark's skull. The body went limp and collapsed onto the kitchen floor. John's hands trembled. His mind reeled. What the hell is happening? A sudden scream outside made him move to the window. What he saw made his blood run cold. The city was in absolute chaos, cars crashed, people ran, and the dead walked. The news played on his TV in the background, but he barely registered the words. Emergency broadcast, violent attacks spreading, unknown virus, stay indoors. John looked around his apartment, his breathing heavy. He had food, water, and a few supplies, but how long could he last? Then the power cut out. Darkness swallowed his apartment. Gunshots echoed through the streets. John gripped the bloodied knife, his heart hammering. He had to make a choice. Stay and die, or leave and fight for survival. He chose the latter. John Carter stood in the dark, gripping the bloodied knife. The sounds of screams and distant gunshots sent a chill down his spine. Staying in his apartment wasn't an option, not with the power gone and the undead roaming the streets. He needed supplies, a weapon better than a kitchen knife, and most importantly, a way out of the city. Peering out of his window, he saw chaos spreading like wildfire. Car alarms blared, and fires raged in the distance. The streets were littered with bodies, some dead, some twitching, and some slowly rising. His gaze fell on the convenience store across the street. If he was going to survive, that was his first stop. A dangerous move. Taking a deep breath, John grabbed his backpack, stuffing it with essentials, a flashlight, a couple of water bottles, a few protein bars, and a small first aid kit. His hands tightened around the knife's handle as he quietly unlocked his apartment door. The hallway was eerily silent. He knew some of his neighbors were still inside their apartments, probably hiding or already dead. He moved cautiously, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. As he reached the stairwell, a wet gurgling noise stopped him in his tracks. Peering down the stairs, he spotted a man hunched over, feasting on a corpse. Blood dripped from its gnashing teeth, staining the floor. John swallowed hard. One zombie, maybe two. I can sneak past them. He crouched low, stepping carefully to avoid making any noise. The creature didn't react until John's foot slipped on a pool of blood. Squish. The sound was quiet, but it was enough. The zombie's head snapped up, hollow eyes locking onto him. A guttural snarl escaped its throat as it lunged forward. John reacted on instinct, slashing out with his knife. The blade sank into its skull with a sickening crunch, and the creature collapsed. His breath came in short, panicked gasps. He didn't have time to dwell on what he had just done. He pulled his knife free and bolted down the stairs. A desperate alliance. The moment John stepped outside, the stench of blood and smoke hit him like a punch to the gut. The streets were crawling with the dead. He stuck to the shadows, darting between abandoned cars and wreckage, avoiding making noise. As he neared the convenience store, a scream cut through the night. He turned to see a young woman, trapped inside the store, pounding against the glass door as a group of zombies approached. John hesitated. He didn't have time for this. But the look of sheer terror on her face struck something deep inside him. Cursing under his breath, he sprinted forward. "Get down," he shouted. The woman dropped to the floor just as John smashed through the glass with a crowbar from a nearby toolbox. The zombies turned at the noise, their groans growing louder. "Come on!" John yelled, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her through the broken door. They ran, ducking through alleys and side streets, until they found temporary shelter inside an abandoned diner. Panting, the woman looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. You saved me." John nodded, catching his breath. "Name's John." She hesitated, then answered, "Mia." John glanced outside. The undead were still out there. The city was lost. And now, he had a new problem, surviving with a stranger he barely knew. Because in this world, nowhere was safe. John and Mia sat in the abandoned diner, catching their breath. Outside, the moans of the undead echoed through the ruined city. The world they had known was gone, replaced by something out of a nightmare. John wiped the sweat from his brow and checked the supplies he had managed to grab from the convenience store before their escape: 2 bottles of water, a pack of granola bars, and a small pocket knife. Not much, but better than nothing. Mia, still shaken, clutched a metal pipe she had found earlier. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John peered out the cracked diner window. "We can't stay here. The city's overrun. We need to find a safer place, somewhere secure, maybe with more supplies." Mia hesitated. There was a radio broadcast before everything went to hell. A quarantine zone on the outskirts of the city. John frowned. He had heard something similar before his power went out. If that's true, it might be our best shot. But, Mia's voice wavered. What if it's already gone? What if it's a trap? John didn't have an answer for that. The world had changed, and hope was a dangerous thing to hold on to. But sitting in this diner, waiting to die, wasn't an option. The streets of death. They moved cautiously through the city, sticking to alleyways and side streets. Every step felt like walking through a graveyard. The dead shuffled aimlessly, their hollow eyes searching for prey. A burning car illuminated a horrifying scene ahead. Bodies littered the pavement, some still twitching as the virus worked its way through their veins. A man in a security uniform lay against a wall, blood pooling around him. John knelt beside him, grimacing as he checked the man's belt. A gun. He reached out, only for the man's bloodied hand to shoot up and grab his wrist. John jerked back, but the infected security guard was already trying to rise, jaws snapping. Damn it! Before John could react, Mia swung her metal pipe, slamming it into the zombie's skull. A sickening crunch followed as the creature collapsed, unmoving. John stared at her, surprised. Mia was trembling, gripping the pipe so tightly her knuckles turned white. He almost got you." John exhaled. Yeah. Thanks. She nodded, struggling to compose herself. John quickly grabbed the gun and checked the magazine. 4 bullets. That's it. Better than nothing. The hospital of horror. As they pressed on, they spotted a hospital in the distance. Hospitals had medical supplies, food, and maybe even survivors. It was a risk, but one they had to take. The entrance was shattered, glass crunching under their feet as they stepped inside. The air was thick with the stench of death. The once bright hallways were now dark, blood-splattered nightmares. A sign above them read, "Quarantine Ward, Restricted Access." Mia hesitated. This is where it started, isn't it? John tightened his grip on the gun. Looks like it. A low growl came from the corridor ahead. Then another. And another. John's stomach dropped. They weren't alone. The dead were waiting. The dimly lit hospital corridor stretched ahead, filled with shadows that seemed to move. John tightened his grip on the gun, his knuckles white. Mia clutched the metal pipe, her breathing shallow. A low, guttural growl echoed through the hallway, followed by the soft shuffle of dragging feet. The hospital was no longer a place of healing, it had become a tomb. John gestured for Mia to stay quiet as he crept forward, peering around the corner. His heart pounded when he saw them. 5 zombies, their decayed bodies swaying as they sniffed the air, searching for fresh meat. One of them, a nurse, still had an A4 stand tangled around its arm. Another was missing half its jaw, blackened blood dripping from its exposed throat. John cursed under his breath. "We need to get to the supply room," he whispered. "It should be down that hall." Mia nodded, gripping her pipe tighter. "How do we get past them?" John scanned the area. There was a wheelchair a few feet away and a rusted metal cart tipped over. An idea formed in his mind. "Stay close and be ready to move." He picked up a small piece of debris and tossed it toward the opposite hallway. The clatter echoed through the hospital, and immediately, the zombies turned their heads toward the sound. For a second, they stood still, as if processing the noise. Then, with eerie synchronization, they shuffled toward it. Now. John and Mia sprinted down the hall, stepping over bodies and debris. The supply room door was just ahead. John reached for the handle. Locked. "Damn it," he hissed. He turned to Mia. "Watch my back." She nodded as he pulled out the pocketknife and jammed it into the lock. His hands were steady despite the pounding in his chest. Behind them, the zombies let out guttural moans. They had caught on. "Hurry!" Mia whispered, eyes darting between John and the undead. John twisted the knife, forcing the lock. A soft click sounded, and the door creaked open. He shoved Mia inside and slammed the door behind them. The zombies reached the door a second later, pounding against it with decayed fists. John exhaled sharply, pressing his back against the wall. That was too close. Mia slumped onto the floor, catching her breath. "I thought we were dead." John looked around. The supply room was intact, shelves lined with medical kits, bottled water, and a few ration packs. It was the best luck they'd had all day. "We can rest for a bit," John said. "Then we figure out our next move." Mia nodded, but her eyes flickered to the door. The undead were still out there, moaning and waiting. They had escaped death for now. But in a city overrun by monsters, survival was never guaranteed. John and Mia sat in the dimly lit supply room, catching their breath as the pounding on the door grew weaker. The undead outside weren't giving up, but at least, for now, they were safe. John rummaged through the shelves, grabbing a roll of bandages, a bottle of antiseptic, and a few packs of painkillers. He also found a couple of protein bars and passed one to Mia. She accepted it, peeling the wrapper with trembling fingers. "How long do you think we can stay here?" she asked. John took a swig from his water bottle. "Not long. We need to get out before more of them come." Mia nodded, but there was something in her eyes, something John recognized. Exhaustion. Fear. the weight of survival pressing down on her. "We keep moving," he said, trying to reassure her. "We have a goal, the quarantine zone. That's our best shot." Mia hesitated, then sighed. "Okay. But how do we get out of here?" A desperate escape. John checked the door. The moaning had faded, but he knew better than to trust the silence. He pressed his ear against the wood, nothing. Slowly, he cracked it open. The hallway was empty. "Let's go," he whispered. They moved quickly, sticking close to the walls. The hospital had once been filled with doctors, nurses, and patients. Now, only the dead remained. Bloodstains and broken medical equipment littered the halls. They reached the stairwell. John hesitated. The stairs would be an easy way down, but also a death trap if the zombies were waiting. Mia pointed to a map on the wall. "There's a fire escape at the end of the hallway." John nodded. "Let's take it." They hurried down the hall, but just as they neared the fire escape door, a chilling sound made them freeze. A scream. A human scream. John and Mia exchanged glances. Someone was still alive. The moral dilemma. The screams came from a nearby room. Through the small window on the door, John saw a man inside, a hospital janitor, his leg trapped under a collapsed metal cabinet. He was struggling, his face twisted in pain. "Help! Please!" John gritted his teeth. If they helped, they'd make noise. More zombies would come. They had barely made it this far. Was it worth the risk? Mia grabbed John's arm. "We can't just leave him." John hesitated. Survival meant making hard choices. But he wasn't sure if he was ready to let someone die when he could stop it. The moaning started again. John's stomach dropped as he turned. A horde of zombies was emerging from the other end of the hallway. They had seconds to decide. Save the man, or save themselves. John's mind raced. The janitor was still screaming, his eyes filled with desperation. The zombies were closing in fast, 10, maybe more, their hollow groans growing louder. "We have to help him," Mia pleaded, gripping John's arm. John clenched his jaw. Damn it. He knew saving the man was risky, but leaving him to die would be just as bad. He rushed forward, wedging his hands under the fallen cabinet. "Help me lift this," he barked at Mia. She hesitated only for a second before gripping the other side. Together, they heaved with all their strength. The cabinet barely budged. The janitor let out a cry of pain. "It's crushing my leg." John gritted his teeth. "Come on." He gave it one last push, and the cabinet tipped just enough for the man to free his leg. "Get up. Move," John ordered. The janitor tried to stand but collapsed, clutching his injured leg. He wasn't going to be able to run. Mia looked at John, panic in her eyes. "What do we do?" The moans were getting closer. John didn't think. He grabbed the janitor and slung his arm over his shoulder. "We go." Running out of time. They half-dragged, half-carried the janitor toward the fire escape. Behind them, the first zombie rounded the corner, a doctor, his white coat drenched in dried blood, half his face missing. More followed. "Move, move, move," John shouted. Mia shoved the fire escape door open, and a rush of cold night air hit them. A metal staircase spiraled down into an alley below. John looked back. The zombies were only a few steps away. No time to think. He pushed Mia forward. "Go first." She scrambled down the steps. John followed, dragging the janitor with him. The metal groaned under their weight. Then, crack! A rusted section of the staircase gave way. The janitor slipped from John's grasp, tumbling down the last few steps with a painful thud. John barely caught himself before falling, his heart hammering. "Are you okay?" Mia called from below. The janitor groaned in pain, but he was still alive. "I think so." Above them, the zombies reached the fire escape. The first one, a nurse, stepped onto the broken platform. Snap! The rusted metal collapsed beneath her. The zombie plummeted, hitting the ground with a sickening crunch. John didn't wait to see if it got back up. He hauled the janitor to his feet. "We need to go. Now. A city that won't let go." The alley was dark, filled with the smell of rot and smoke. Gunfire crackled in the distance. John knelt beside the janitor, checking his leg. It was badly bruised, maybe broken, but not bitten. "Can you walk?" The janitor winced. I think so." John looked at Mia. "We can't stay here. The noise will bring more of them." Mia nodded, gripping her pipe. "Then let's find somewhere safe." As they moved into the shadows of the city, John couldn't shake the feeling in his gut. They had survived the hospital. But something told him the worst was yet to come. John, Mia, and the injured janitor limped through the darkened alley, their breaths heavy, their nerves frayed. The city was eerily quiet, except for the occasional distant gunfire and the ever-present moans of the undead. John knew they needed shelter, and fast. The hospital had been a mistake, too infested. They couldn't afford another one. The janitor, whose name they'd learned was Luis, gritted his teeth as he hobbled along. "I can't keep up," he panted. Just leave me. I'll slow you down." Mia frowned. "We didn't risk our lives to save you just to abandon you now." John scanned the surrounding buildings. They had made it into an old commercial district, boarded-up shops and abandoned cars lined the street. Then, he spotted it. There. He pointed to a 2-story hardware store. The front was wrecked, glass shattered, but the upper floors might still be intact. They moved quickly, slipping inside through a broken door. The smell of rust and mildew filled the air. Shelves had been looted, but scattered tools and supplies remained. John checked the aisles. No movement. "Upstairs," he whispered. Mia helped Luis up the stairs while John barricaded the entrance with whatever he could find, a fallen shelf, some old toolboxes. It wouldn't hold against a large horde, but it was better than nothing. For now, they were safe. The hard truth. Mia found a dusty mattress in a storage room and helped Luis sit down. He groaned in pain, clutching his injured leg. John crouched beside him, checking the swelling. "This is bad. You need proper medical treatment." Luis let out a bitter chuckle. "Yeah? Where am I supposed to get that?" John didn't answer. They all knew the truth, there were no hospitals left. No doctors. No rescue teams. "We'll find something," Mia said, her voice firm. "There might be a pharmacy nearby." John rubbed his temples. He admired Mia's optimism, but he wasn't sure how much longer they could keep this up. Supplies were running low, they had no safe haven, and the city was getting more dangerous by the hour. Then, a noise. John stiffened. Footsteps. Not shuffling like the dead. These were lighter. Faster. Human. Mia grabbed her pipe. John raised his gun. Luis struggled to sit up. A shadow passed by the window. Then a voice. "You inside? We know you're in there." John's stomach twisted. Survivors. But were they friendly? Or worse than the dead? Mia looked at him, eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" John exhaled, keeping his gun aimed at the door. "We find out if we're about to make new allies, or new enemies." John gripped his gun tighter, his heart pounding. The voice outside was followed by the sound of boots crunching against broken glass. "Come on," the voice called again. "We don't have all day." Mia shot him a nervous glance. "What if they're dangerous?" John didn't lower his weapon. "They probably are." Luis groaned, still clutching his injured leg. "We can't fight off a group. If they mean harm, we're dead." John knew he was right. They were low on ammo, exhausted, and outnumbered. He peered through a gap in the boarded-up window. 3 figures stood outside, a woman with a shotgun, a man with a baseball bat, and another with a machete strapped to his back. They didn't look like scavengers. They looked like people who had learned to survive the hard way. "Last chance," the woman said. "You let us in, or we let ourselves in." John took a deep breath. There was no easy choice. He decided. A risky gamble. Slowly, he lowered his gun and stepped toward the door. "We're coming out," he called. No sudden moves. Mia tensed but didn't argue. She helped Luis to his feet as John cautiously unblocked the entrance. The second the door cracked open, the woman kicked it fully inward, shotgun raised. John took a step back, gun at his side but ready. "Easy," he warned. "We don't want trouble." The woman studied him. "That so? Then why are you hiding?" John kept his voice steady. "We're just trying to survive." The man with the baseball bat, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his cheek, grunted. "Aren't we all?" His eyes landed on Luis, who was barely standing. "Your friend doesn't look too good." Mia spoke up. "He's hurt. He needs medicine." The woman smirked. "Medicine's not free. We don't just hand out supplies to strangers." John clenched his jaw. "What do you want?" The woman exchanged glances with her group. "We're headed to the quarantine zone. But we need more people who can fight." Mia frowned. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" The man with the machete shrugged. "You don't." John studied them. If they were lying, they'd be walking into a trap. But if they were telling the truth, it was the first real chance they had. Luis groaned in pain. They didn't have time to be picky. John made the call. "We'll go with you." The woman lowered her shotgun slightly. Smart choice. The journey begins. As they stepped into the ruined city streets, John couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The undead were still a threat. But the living? They might be even worse.